Hello and I. Alright, so back with another one. Today I really want to discuss and highlight the fact that academic science, even Google itself, all these things that we're supposed to use as resources are extremely biased, right? So, for instance, when they say things like all non-Africans have 1 to 2% Neanderthal DNA, they try to make it seem like it's a minimal thing, right? Like this thing doesn't matter. And they switched up so much how they defined Neanderthals once it was scientifically proven that all non-Africans descended from these Neanderthals. Before they found that out, they all agreed that they were primate-like, they were ape men, right? But as soon as they realized that Neanderthals were part of non-Africans, then all of a sudden it was, they're these, they're just like humans, they're just like Homo sapiens. But before in science, they made sure to say how distinct these ape-like primitive creatures were, right? And the fact that they refused to use the word hybrid. And then when I say hybrid, in scientific term, two species mixing together and reproducing, that is what you call a hybrid. Google it for yourself. Go look into science texts. Neanderthal and Homo sapien, which is a human, which is the original Africans, right? We are human, Homo sapien. Non-Africans who have Neanderthal DNA in them, they are hybrids. Why is this? Because they have Homo sapien, which is a different species, and Neanderthal DNA, which is a different species as well. And I'm going to be breaking down just how different this species was to us, because it's all in their science, and I'll be using exactly what their research papers say. But because we don't look into things deeper, and because we take things on face value, and we just, because of the way they use the language in their favor, right, they minimize the importance of the fact that, they are pure humans, pure Homo sapiens, and there are hybrids. And this is a known fact. And if you have a different species within you and mixing, just like a mule, what is a mule? A donkey and a horse. What is that? A hybrid. Why? Because a donkey and a horse is two different species. Yes, they can reproduce, but they're still two distinct species, which is why they go through fertility problems, etc., etc. And guess who else had fertility issues? The Neanderthals and Homo sapiens, when they were mating with the hybrids that came out, they had fertility issues as well. Just like mules have fertility issues. Their males are sterile, meaning the mules that are reproduced from the donkey and the horse, the males, they cannot reproduce no further. They're sterile. Guess who else was like that? Neanderthal and Homo sapien hybrid male children. They could not reproduce. And in the Bible, what does it say? Does it not say that the sons of God laid with the daughters of men? And if we take men as in men being the hybrids, men, because if you actually look in the dictionary, men stands for mankind, kind of a man, right? And then when you look at the Homo sapiens and you look at us humans as God's children, because we are pure, right? We are the original eyes before the hybrids came, because remember the hybrids were engineered. You don't find, even in the wild, you don't find a donkey and a horse mating. The only time you find two different species mating is when there's an outside influence. All right. Anyway, I digress. Okay. So moving back. So just like the males were sterile, the hybrid males were sterile as well. Meaning when the Homo sapien woman and the Neanderthal man had hybrids, which by the way, I do not believe that was a process like that, because let's be honest, once I break down to you just exactly how different the Neanderthals were to us and how primate-like they were, you are going to understand that there's absolutely no way in hell it would make sense for African women who have been looking, by the way, we've been looking this way. They keep pushing back the years. They keep having to extend the years because they keep finding older and older fossils. But for now, they found a 315,000-year-old fossil that looks exactly like modern day Africans today. They have still not found that so-called primate link that they try to say, oh, Africans, we somehow came from apes and monkeys and turned into... They still haven't been able to find that link. They just keep finding older and older African fossils. Okay. Anyway, so yeah, let's get into it. Yeah, let's get into it. All right. So on paper, they admit non-Africans have Neanderthal ancestry. That's just another way of saying non-Africans descend from hybrids. But notice the language games. So the academic phrasing is all non-Africans carry 1 to 2% Neanderthal DNA due to Asian interbreeding. Sounds like a minor side note, easy to gloss over. But what it actually means is the founding non-African populations were hybridized humans carrying DNA from another hominin that Africans don't have. That's not just trivia, that's identity level, okay? Now, why do you think they would avoid saying this? Come on, I know you guys know. Why would you think they would avoid saying this? So identity and hierarchy. If you phrase it bluntly, non-Africans are hybrids. It creates a visible divide. Africans are the baseline human, others equals admix. That challenges racial, political history, even colonial myths about who is original, okay? Now, also the narrative control. Saying we're all just humans with a touch of Neanderthal keeps the story flat, universal, and less explosive. Saying entire continental populations descend from hybrids highlights difference and origin, okay? Now, the cultural backlash as well. People would ask dangerous follow-ups. So are non-Africans less pure human? Yes, because they're hybrids and they're mixed with a different species which was not human, okay? And it wasn't human-like, it was ape-like, which is why they spoke about it in their newspapers, in their like it was all there in black and white. But as soon as they found out they had Neanderthal, the way they switched up the whole narrative, yeah? Now, they would ask things like, are Neanderthal traits still shaping behavior? Which it is. Why only outside Africa? These questions touch raw nerves, so the wording is softened. There are two different layers, okay? The DNA evidence, which is admitted. They openly say non-Africans have Neanderthal DNA. That's them admitting hybridity on the genetic level. DNA doesn't lie. So the OS1 Bachokiro is basically one of the Neanderthal ancestors, yeah? It also shows that they were recent. So that fossil shows that its grandparents, so about 3 to 4 generations, great-great-grandparents, were actually Neanderthal. It had a Neanderthal grandparent, okay? So we've already know for a fact that non-African populations descended from hybrids, yeah? Because it's in the fossils. Now, the fossil evidence is downplayed. This is where the silence happens. If they showed the public actual skeletons with mixed traits and stamped them as the hybrid ancestors of Europeans and Eurasians, it would make the hybrid origin visually undeniable. You wouldn't be able to reframe it as harmless as 1 to 2%, okay? It would also break the linear progress story. Neanderthal extinct, sapiens expand, neat replacement. It would destroy that. It would also highlight that Africans stayed unmixed while others didn't, which they don't want front and center, okay? Now, pardon me, guys. Why fossils matter more than DNA for the public? Most people don't think in genomes. They think in bones and faces. If you show a skull in a museum and say, this is the actual hybrid ancestor of non-Africans, that hits different. That's why the Denisova 11 was safe to show as a hybrid, because it was a Neanderthal and a Denisovan, both archaic, no modern humans involved. It doesn't threaten sapien status, okay? But when it comes to sapiens and Neanderthal hybrids, they rename the bones as archaic modern human, mosaic traits, or early European, instead of owning the word hybrid. So, this is the connection, all right? They admit hybridity in DNA because they can bury it in numbers and jargon. They don't reveal hybridity in fossils because bones make the truth too visible, too disruptive, and too hard to spin. All right? Now, even with the recent hybrid evidence, so the fossils like OAS1, yeah, it clearly shows long Neanderthal DNA blocks in their genome. So long blocks mean a Neanderthal ancestor was only 4 to 6 generations back. Basically, someone's great-great-grandparent. That's what makes them recent hybrids in scientific terms, all right? Now, when geneticists look at where Neanderthal DNA survives in living non-Africans, they notice it's missing from the big parts of the genome. Almost no Neanderthal DNA on the X chromosome. Very little in male fertility genes, so the sperm related, yeah? This is called the large X effect. When two species hybridize, the sex chromosomes often carry incompatibility. The explanation scientists give is Neanderthal sapien hybrids were partially infertile, especially the males. Over time, natural selection scrubbed out Neanderthal genes from those sensitive areas. Now, these are the contradictions. If hybrids were recent and they were having kids, how comes we see long Neanderthal blocks in their autosomes, so the normal chromosomes, yeah, but almost no Neanderthal genes in sex-linked regions in modern humans? It feels like saying, yes, they were mating enough to leave huge DNA chunks, but also not mating successfully enough to pass on half the genome. That's the inconsistency. So what's really going on? Stage 1, 50 to 45,000 years ago, some hybridization happened. Those individuals really did exist, okay? So the Gilgameshes, if you've read about the Gilgamesh, then you know. What was he? They say he was 2/3 a god. What do you think those hybrids would be? If you've got listen, it's the same hybridization. 2/3 human, one third what? Neanderthal. The exact same hybrids that they wrote about in the first ever story. Those would have been the giants, okay? Now, after that, stage 2, most of their Neanderthal DNA was toxic or incompatible for fertility and survival, okay? Stage 3, when survived in non-Africans today, it's only tiny fragments that weren't harmful. So those giants of the Bible, them days or whatever, not that I'm religious, but you know what I'm saying? Because you hear about these giant stories and all of these things. You hear about it, yeah? They got wiped out with floods, whatever you want to say, But then there's populations that had their DNA and remained. I don't know where their man were hiding or what was going on, but they popped back out again and spread all over the gaff. All right? Now, what survived in non-Africans today is only the tiny fragments that weren't harmful, like in skin, hair, immune response, and that's why living people only have 1 to 2%. Okay? Now, the fossils show hybrids existed. The genome maps today showed that only a carefully filtered set of Neanderthal genes survived. So this is why you don't see half and half fossils displayed, okay? If male hybrids were mostly sterile, like mules, only certain female lineages could pass on Neanderthal DNA. That means the actual gene flow was very limited and heavily one-sided, which makes the official story, oh, everyone outside of Africa is 1 to 2% Neanderthal, sound simple, but it hides the brutal truth. Hybrids existed, but were not fully viable, okay? So there's a tension between the fossils showing fresh mixing and the genome showing systematic erasure on sex chromosomes. The neat way they spin it is selection pressure, but the unspoken implication is hybrids weren't fully human in the sense of interbreeding freely. They were a fragile bridge, not a stable population, all right? Now, the official narrative, which is what they try to sell to us, yeah? They say non-Africans have 1 to 2% Neanderthal DNA. It's random fragments left over hybridization 50 to 60,000 years ago. Selection deleted bad bits, especially on the X chromosome, yeah, the female sex parts, sex genes, yeah, leaving only neutral ones. It sounds neat, but it collapses under pressure, all right? So, if the interbreeding was random, different regions, so Europe, Asia, Oceania, should carry different Neanderthal chunks. Why do they all carry the same ones? That's like, look at when your parents have siblings, right? Everybody turns out different. Everybody gets a little bit of this, get a little bit of different combination from each parent. How the hell do the same Neanderthal genes go across the same entire uniform of the Eurasian population that have Neanderthal DNA? How can it be in the same exact locations everywhere? How is that possible? But don't worry, I'm going to show you exactly how it's possible. Because guess what? You can replicate that in the lab. And they stay doing that, and they've been doing it. But let's continue. Because you just want to, don't play with me. Listen, I'm covered in hot. Let's see if you make it, bro. Anywho's, yeah? So, instead, we find the same handful of Neanderthal genes widespread across Eurasia. Even stranger, those genes are not random. They cluster in skin pigmentation, hair texture, immunity, and metabolism. Okay, that looks less like random hybridization and more like targeted introgression. For example, only very specific Neanderthal genes were allowed to survive and spread. Now, this points to filtering and pressure, not coincidence. So the uniformity, it equals the bottleneck plus selective sweep. If a small group of hybridized humans left of Africa and their descendants colonized Eurasia, then so by leaving Africa, by the way, I mean the Levant area, yeah? So not Africa really, but back in the day it would have been part, but like, so now the Levant area would be Iraq, all of that. So that Middle East, yeah? That part, okay? Now, and their descendants colonized Eurasia, then everyone outside of Africa today inherits from the same small hybrid founding stock. That explains why the Neanderthal package looks the same everywhere. Not random, it's an engineered outcome. Some researchers frame it as a natural selection, but the precision with which only those traits survived feels almost curated. I'm just being polite by saying almost. When I break it down further, you'll see that it blood clot is curated. But anyway, it's as if Eurasian populations were tagged with a uniform Neanderthal imprint that had survival value but carried no identity-shaking Neanderthal baggage. So, the fact that Neanderthal DNA today is concentrated functionally in relevant systems such as skin, hair, and immune, while being wiped clean from the sex chromosomes, brain and development genes, and fertility genes, suggests that the hybrid story is not a smooth blend. It's more like a sieve was applied. Out of the entire genome, only 40 to 50 genes got locked into non-Africans, almost as if the rest wasn't allowed through. Now, if they admit this plainly, the story would no longer be a bit of harmless Asian interbreeding. It would become entire populations outside of Africa descend from a genetic bottleneck where a very few selective uniform Neanderthal imprint was carried forward, which immediately raises a point. Who or what controlled the filter? Who was it? Who was deliberately manipulating this? Because it cannot be nature. Nature would create it to be sparse. Different Neanderthal genes would have popped up here, different there. But this uniformity, all right. Now, the uniform spread is not random drift. It looks engineered, all right? So it seems like a tiny bottleneck founder group or something even more deliberate, all right? Now, when we find these fossils, all right, so like the OAs, the hybrid fossils, etc., yeah? When we find those early fossils, the 40 to 45k years ago, their genomes have big chunks of Neanderthal sequence still intact. That's because their Neanderthal ancestors were just a few generations back. Recombination hadn't broken the DNA into tiny pieces yet. These long stretches tell us hybrids did happen, not just hypothetically. Now, when we look at modern non-Africans, Neanderthal DNA is almost completely absent on the X chromosomes and fertility-related genes. Right? The explanation scientists give is hybrid incompatibility. Hybrids may have had issues with male fertility. Any Neanderthal DNA on sex chromosomes reduced reproductive success. Over thousands of years This is what they say. Natural selection scrubbed those chunks out because carriers had fewer surviving kids. Now, the sieve effect. So, what happened between those fresh hybrids and non-Africans today is basically a filtering process. Hybrids are born, their genomes look like the oase, long Neanderthal blocks all over the place, including sex chromosome. Then, hybrids with too much Neanderthal in sensitive areas, fertility, brain wiring, development, don't pass on their genes. Then the survivors, only hybrids who carried Neanderthal DNA in neutral advantaged regions, this is what they'll like to tell us here happened. The skin, hair, and immunity, all of them, the skin, hair, and immunity, right, left lasting descendants, all right? Now, we know that's all BS. You know that none of that makes sense. Even with the little things that I've told you so far, I'm pretty sure, like, you can hear, like, the BS in it, right? So, in early hybrids, we should see sex chromosome segments. Yeah, they probably did exist then, but because those specific hybrids didn't found the main surviving lineages, their bad X-linked DNA died out. What non-Africans inherit today is only from the hybrids whose Neanderthal DNA avoided those incompatible regions. All right. So, like I said, with all of that, can you see how the contradictions don't make any sense? Because this is why even in Africa, right? Africa, we hold the most diversity, the biggest diversity. Two Africans from the same tribe have more genetic diversity between them compared to a white person and an Asian person. So that already tells you a lot. Two Africans from the same tribe have way more genetic diversity between them than a white person and an Asian person. All right? And I'll break down to you why genetic diversity is extremely important. Now, let's get into the good part, all right? This is the part most of you have been waiting for, okay? So, let me tell you what the Neanderthal and sapien hybrids would have looked like, yeah? The craniofacial shape, okay? Now, so this is this part, yeah? Now, Neanderthals have a projecting midface, strong brow ridges, wide nasal opening. Homo sapiens, Africans, we have a flatter face, more delicate brow, narrower nose. The hybrid, would have been a mosaic of that. So chin from Homo sapiens, but robust brow or nasal structure from Neanderthal. Okay? Now the jaws and teeth. Neanderthals often had retromolar gaps, large rooted molars. So hybrids would have retained some of those dental patterns alongside Homo sapien jawlines. The body build. Neanderthals had stocky, barrel-chested, shorter limbs. Homo sapiens, leaner, longer limbs, especially the Africans of us that lived in the more hotter climates, yeah? Now, hybrids would have had an intermediate build, so more robust than Africans, but not fully Neanderthal. Now, hair, skin, immune traits inherited through DNA. Surviving Neanderthal genes affect keratin, which is the hair texture and skin toughness, pigmentation, so lighter or freckled skin in northern groups, and immunity, response to pathogens. So, let's go into now. Let's break down further, and I'm going to tell you exactly how these dots try to say like Neanderthals, non-Africans have 1 to 2% Neanderthal DNA, and they try to make it sound, people be in my comments like, Neanderthals are human-like. They were just like you. No, they weren't. They were primate-like. And I'm going to list you all the ways they were primate-like, yeah? So the retromolar gap. A retromolar gap is the space behind the third molar, so your wisdom tooth. Neanderthals often had this. Their jaws were longer front to back, so there was a little extra room behind the wisdom teeth. Most modern humans, so Africans, don't have it. Our jaws are shorter, so wisdom teeth are crammed in. Primates, some non-human primates such as chimps and gorillas also have a proportionally longer jaws, which can create more space behind the molars to the retromolar gap. Neanderthals have it as well. So it's more common in primates generally, and Neanderthals also have that same trait. Now, the pterodont molars, the pterodont molars, is the teeth with large pulp chambers and shorter roots. They're more robust, good for heavy chewing. Neanderthals had them consistently, while in modern humans, they're rare, though they do show up okay? Sometimes, yeah? So that's with the shorter roots or whatever. And it says here that when it does show up, guess what? Guess where it is, where it shows up in modern humans. Guess where you think? In Eurasians, with what? The Neanderthal descendants. Funny that, yeah? Now, primates. Some other primates show similar robust molar forms since their diets require heavy grinding. Neanderthals' taurodont molars basically reflect an adaptation to that primate-like chewing system rather than gracile sapiens' teeth. All right? Now, these are the kinds of features that make Neanderthal fossils immediately recognizable to anthropologists. This is why they're so easily recognizable. If they were human like us, then you wouldn't really be able to easily tell the difference. But you can easily tell the difference between them because they looked very distinct to us, guys. All right? More features. So the optical bone, a pronounced bulge at the back of the skull, seen in some of the archaic humans being Neanderthals, and absent in modern Homo sapiens. So, also the brow ridge. Neanderthals had very thick, continuous brow ridges, more like the earlier hominins and apes. Modern humans have smaller, separated brows. All right, so Africans have smaller, separated brows. Remember, the only reason that they try to say everyone's human now is because they have mostly African Homo sapien DNA. But just that little bit of 1 to 2% Neanderthal DNA that they got has everybody here, that because they're the hybrids. This is why they look so different to the original African Homo sapien. Which, by the way, even the Cheddar Man, which was the dark-skinned African man, the Africans that were here all up in Europe, all up in Eurasia, 10,000 years ago, guess what? They didn't have any Neanderthal DNA, but they said that Neanderthals went extinct 40 to 50,000 years ago, whatever it was, 45,000 years ago. So if they went extinct 45,000 years ago, and yet the Cheddar Man who was here in Europe 10,000 years ago didn't have Neanderthal DNA, how the hell did a whole new population arise suddenly in the last, let's say, for real, using history, 1,500 years ago with Neanderthal DNA? How did they pop up? How? If the Neanderthals went extinct thousands of years ago, and there was already populations in Eurasia living here without Neanderthal DNA for so long. Anyway, that's a whole nother video. So, with the mid-facial prognathism, so the middle of the face, nose and upper jaw juts forward. This is seen in Neanderthals and in primates, but Homo sapiens have flatter faces. The wide nasal aperture. Neanderthals had very broad nasal openings, so more similar to primates than to Homo sapiens. Now, with the retromolar gap, the space behind the wisdom tooth, also is similar to primates. No chin. Unlike Homo sapiens, Neanderthals lacked a projecting chin. Where else do you find people without chins, guys? Anyway, most primates also lack a true chin. It's uniquely a Homo sapien feature. The barrel-shaped ribcage, so wider, rounder chest, is like great apes compared to the narrow human ribcage. That's what Neanderthals have. Told you, look at all these primate-like features, and you want to explain to me, and you want to tell me that African Homo sapiens were laying down with these. I'm listing to you their primate features, by the way. So you've got short distal limbs, shorter forearms and chins relative to thighs or upper arms. That makes the body stocky, but also echoes proportions in other primates. Robust bones, more thicker cortical bones, heavily muscled attachment sites, again, more in line with primates, Other unique traits include inner ear canals. Neanderthals had different shaped semicircular canals, It's distinct from Homo sapiens, but closer to primates. The shoulder joint orientation. Their clavicle and scapular orientation suggests stronger overhead and throwing motions, but with more ape-like placement of the shoulders. So when you man on here like, Neanderthals were just like humans. Neanderthals were just like humans. Have you actually read about Neanderthals' features? Have you? Or do you just read what the wording says on Google or quick search, and then because they word it nicely, because they're obviously biased, because Google's biased, yeah? And then you don't actually read into the things. But if you read into them, I don't know. But then I think to myself, no, I don't care. Because me, when I see things, I see the BS. So for me, I feel like either you're just blind or you're choosing to not see. You just don't want to see it. You just don't want to accept the fact that you're hybrid. Because I don't understand how any, like, if I was non-African, yeah, and I was seeing the things that I was seeing, blood clots, yeah, and I was seeing the things that I was seeing, there's no way I could just sit there and not be interested and not try and find out. And I do understand how it can be scary, right? I do get it, but I would rather be in the know. Let me know what it is, you know? Let me know about myself. All right, anyway. So, in short, Neanderthals keep a whole suit of ape-like traits: heavy brow ridge, no chin, robust teeth, barrel chest, shorter limbs, while Homo sapiens have a chin, flat face, long limbs, lighter skeleton. Hybrids would have carried a mosaic, some primate features from Neanderthals and some Homo sapien traits. Yeah? And when you look into medical records and you look at Eurasians and their descendants, and you see the type of diseases that they have and illnesses that you have, boy, another video for another day. But you'll see that those very same traits, they primate like the extreme hairy faces, the tails, except you. Anyway, come on. Anywho's, yeah. So they claim a small group of sapiens leaves Africa 60,000 years ago, mixes with Neanderthals 50 to 55,000 years ago, and gives rise to all non-Africans. The problem is there are virtually no skeletons from 55 to 45,000 years ago in the Levant or Arabia, okay? We only get genomes after admixture is already diluted. Bear with me one moment, guys. Okay, we're still good. All right. We only get, this means the founder population is invisible. Everything about it is extrapolated. You know what I mean? It's basically everything is put backwards, yeah? Now, they claim interbreeding was rare and random. But the problem is everyone outside of Africa carries the same handful of Neanderthal segments in the same functional systems: the skin, immunity, and metabolism, okay? Random interbreeding should produce patchy, region-specific fragments. Instead, we see a curated package across Eurasia. This is explained away as a single founding bottleneck plus selection, but that's a model, not a measured process. All right? Now, they also claim the Out of Africa story is nailed down. The problem is their own literature admits ghost populations, unknown archaic introgression, and possible multiple exits from Africa that failed or hybridized. Yet public-facing summaries still present one clean migration with minor Neanderthal mixing, okay, which is BS. Yeah. They also claim that non-Africans descend from hybrids. After more than a century of digs, there is still not one public-facing skeleton labeled "this is the hybrid ancestor." All right, they refuse. Or if they haven't found them, then it is what it is. But even so, yeah, they just refuse to use this hybrid term. Okay, now, Homo sapiens left Africa 60,000 years ago. Okay, this is what they want us to accept. They encountered Neanderthals in Europe or Asia. They interbred enough times that every non-African today carries Neanderthal DNA. So on paper, it looks neat, clinical, a few mating events. However, in reality, that's a real huge claim. whole populations carrying the imprint means this wasn't a one-night accident, all right? So why would fully modern humans with our brains, our symbolic culture, our complex language consistently reproduce with beings described as primate-like, stocky, heavy-browed, and visibly different? It's not a small-scale curiosity. For non-Africans to all carry Neanderthal mark, it implies multiple encounters, enough offspring surviving to seed whole populations, a level of social or sexual acceptance that doesn't add up with the us versus them, which would have been, do you understand what I'm saying? Because Neanderthals look so different from us, they would have been an us versus them thing, okay? Now, coercion force. The narrative avoids this, but large-scale hybridization could include violence, capture, or dominance, the same way human groups later mixing during conquests. That's uncomfortable, so it's scrubbed. All right? Now, what if these encounters weren't random mating, but structured exchanges, forced breeding programs? Some anthropologists quietly suggest cultural contact zones, but that doesn't make it to textbooks. And by contact zones, it just means areas where these hybrids were in numbers. Like, this is where the hybridization was taking place. And then it spread through the steppe people conquesting the lands and all of that good. Well, I mean, not good, but you know what I mean. All right. So the eerie uniformity, the same Neanderthal fragments in everyone outside Africa, in the same systems like skin and immunity, looks less like random bedroom encounters and more like a selective transfer, whether by sieving or deliberate manipulation. Now, humans visibly avoid mating outside of their group unless coercion or ideology. Groups that look and act extremely different rarely blend on a mass scale without external pressure. Yet we're told this happened smoothly across continents and left no messy Neanderthal clans visible in the fossil record. That disconnect is why it just doesn't add up. So the real question is not, did Homo sapiens and Neanderthals mate? We have DNA that proves that, okay? But it's, how did a few unions become a universal signature across billions of non-Africans? That leap from occasional hybrids to a genetic stamp on entire continents is what smells engineered, curated, or politically massaged. All right? Now, it's one thing to say that some sapiens mated with Neanderthals. It's completely different thing to say every non-African on Earth today carries the same handful of Neanderthal genes. That jump from occasional interbreeding to a uniform genetic stamp across billions is the part nobody explains honestly. Now, all non-Africans share roughly the same 40 to 50 introgressed Neanderthal regions, mostly in the skin, hair, immunity, and metabolism. Those fragments are not randomly distributed. They're the same ones from Europe to East Asia. Modern people don't have random Neanderthal DNA scattered differently by region. They have the same core package like a software install. So non-Africans, yeah? Now, if interbreeding were truly just a few random flings, each region would have had its own fingerprint of Neanderthal fragments. Some groups would have had lots, some none, some different sets, but that's not what we see. They try to explain this by saying only a very small band of modern humans left Africa. That band hybridized with Neanderthals once or twice. That hybrid group then expanded explosively, replacing everyone else in Eurasia. Natural selection removed all but the useful Neanderthal genes. So now everyone outside of Africa has the same bits. And that's the story they like to give. However, you need a very precise sequence of events for this to happen. One tiny founder group, very limited gene flow, only certain Neanderthal genes surviving, and then an explosion of that population across 2 continents. There's no direct fossil or archaeological record of this founder group. We only know it's a model. The surviving Neanderthal genes are functionally relevant, so skin, immunity, metabolism, not neutral. This looks like curation and not a drift. So, this is exactly where the neat story breaks. The DNA proves interbreeding. The uniformity and package looks curated. The fossil record is missing at the key time and place. The sex chromosome is purged and assumed not observed. That's not a solved story. It's a model papered over to look solved. All right? Now, with the primate-like group is when the primate-like group is made to mate with African women, or a small group of African women are taken, the resulting children are the hybrids. A tiny founding stock with a uniform genetic package because it starts with only a controlled handful of mothers and fathers. You get exactly the same Neanderthal fragments in all offspring. Rapid spread. Instead of natural expansion, you get a militarized or systemized spread, conquest, colonization, forced assimilation, which explains how a small group's DNA suddenly dominates entire continents. Now, as these hybrids multiply and then wage war or colonize, the original unmixed populations either disappear or are absorbed, and the hybrid DNA becomes the default outside Africa. Now remember, all outside Africa was black. Blackety black, okay? Then the hybrids came in, and what did they do? They replaced the original populations. And that's why you got people that are still fighting for a place to call home till this very day. If you know what I'm talking about. All right? Now, this is the taboo territory. In academia, okay, because it raises explosive questions. Who or what did the engineering? Was there deliberate hybridization or just desperate survival? Was this the first large-scale breeding program in human history? And it undercuts the natural evolutionary frame it undercuts the natural evolutionary frame they've built the textbooks around. All right? So what we can say with hard data, non-Africans descend from a very small hybridized population. That hybridization produced a uniform package of Neanderthal genes. Other lineages vanished. What we cannot say yet, okay, is who initiated the hybridization? Was it coerced or engineered? Whether there was an outside intelligence guiding it, all right? But the pattern is there. A uniform hybrid signature plus rapid expansion plus the erasure of others is real. It's exactly what an engineered release of a hybrid population would look like. So if you strip away the polite story and just read the raw evidence, you don't get a picture of thousands of years of random mating. What you do get is a small hybridized founder group with a specific set of archaic genes spreading rapidly and replacing or absorbing others. All right? That's what you see. Okay? Now, I want to get to the part of my notes where I'm talking about. I want to show you exactly how they. Actually, let's do this. Now, random mating between two visibly different groups across multiple regions should produce lots of Neanderthal fragments in different regions. Some people with none, some people with a lot, some with unique pieces. A long, messy transition period. Instead, what we see is this. The same curated package in everyone outside of Africa. Very few half Neanderthal skeletons. A narrow time window when the mixing supposedly happened. That's not how unstructured hybridization works. That's how a bottlenecked rollout works. So, a hybrid is created intentionally or under some structured program. Because it starts with just a few mothers or fathers, all offsprings have the same genetic payload. That hybrid group is moved or expands through conquest, colonization, forced assimilation into new regions. The result is a clone-like uniformity of fragments across vast populations. In the natural world and in lab populations, when you start with a tiny founder group, like just a few breeding pairs, give them a specific genetic makeup and let them colonize a huge area, the genetic pattern you see after many generations is uniform fragments of the founder genome across the whole population, low diversity compared to the source population. Who has low diversity compared to Africans? Non-Africans. Who's the source population? Africans, yeah? And only a subset of the original genetic material survives, the stuff compatible with survival. This is true whether you're releasing cloned plants, lab mice, or engineered insects. It's a textbook founder effect pattern, all right? So I'm going to explain to you why I keep saying that non-Africans were engineered, and it's not that I'm saying they were all engineered, right? But I'm saying what makes them non-Africans was engineered. And I'm going to prove it to you, because the pattern, exactly how the hybrids showed up and the features that they have, etc., all of this stuff is the same stuff, exactly the same pattern that you see in labs, okay? So when you compare to non-African humans, tiny founder population, genetic modeling shows only a few hundred people left Africa, yeah? So it's only a few hundred. They carry 40 to 50 Neanderthal-derived regions, mostly in skin immune metabolism. So by Africa, I'm talking about the Levant area, yeah? Now, rapid colonization. Within a few thousand years, their descendants fill Eurasia. Low diversity. Non-Africans have markedly less genetic diversity than Africans. Almost everyone outside of Africa shares the same Neanderthal fragments. Yeah, so if you hide the names, this reads like a classic founder effect or template release scenario. I don't know where all my scientists are now, because my scientists are like, I'm a scientist, this is it. So you tell me that if you're a scientist and all of this, and you're telling me that you didn't notice the pattern at all. All right. Now, because instead of a messy scatter of Neanderthal fragments, you get a repeatable genetic pattern in every non-African. The same handful of introgressed genes, the same deserts on the sex chromosomes, and the same bottleneck signature in the rest of the genome. That's exactly the signature you see when a single small group with a very specific genome seeds an entire new population. In lab terms, it's called a genetic sweep. To a layperson, it looks like clones. So, with a real example, I'm going to show you a real example with lab mice or rats, yeah? Now, all over the world, biomedical labs use inbred strains like the C57BL or 6 mice, yeah? They started from just a few breeding pairs in the 1920s. Every C57 mouse today is essentially a genetic copy of those founders. If you sequence them, you'll see long identical blocks of DNA shared across the whole population and a massive loss of diversity compared to wild mice. And when I'm saying these things, I want you to remember about the stuff that I said about the hybrid populations, so you can see the patterns. Because when I say things like loss of genetic diversity, who has less diversity? Non-Africans, yeah? Now, sterile insect release programs. In agriculture, scientists release engineered fruit flies or mosquitoes to crash pest populations. They rear millions from a tiny starter colony carrying a specific trait, whether it's being sterile, fluorescent marker, etc. Now, when released, all of those insects carry the same genetic payload, and if they establish, the population shows a uniform genetic signature of those founding individuals. So they're showing you they already do it, yeah? Now, with the feral horse populations, island populations, the sable island horses, etc., after bottlenecks were re-established from a few handful of animals. Modern herds are highly inbred with low genetic diversity and long shared DNA segments, a founder effect pattern. Okay, the same founder effect that they'll even tell you with the Neanderthals, they'll say it. Okay, now with invasive plants or crops, the kudzu water hyacinths, cane toads, even bananas. When a plant or an animal is introduced to a new continent with just a few seeds or breeding pairs, you get the same clone-like pattern. Everyone has the same genetic variants. Diversity is lost compared to the source. Only a subset of original genome survives. So, what the signature looks like in data: long identical haplotype blocks across the population, reduced heterozygosity, less so, basically less variation, compared to the original stock, identical functional alleles fixed across the new population. That's exactly what geneticists see in non-Africans relative to Africans. Long shared blocks at first, a uniform set of introgress genes, and a huge loss of variation. Okay, so that's what non-Africans have compared to Africans. So it's a textbook founder effect pattern. Yeah. The shape of non-African genome is the same shape you see every time a small bottlenecked group is used to start a much larger population, whether it's mice, insects, or crops. Okay. Now, Africans carry the deepest and widest genetic variation on Earth. Every study shows Africa holds most of human DNA diversity. Non-Africans have much narrower slice. Their genomes look homogeneous compared to Africans. This means that all billions of people outside of Africa are walking around with DNA patterns that can be traced back to a very tiny founding group, not the full spectrum of early human diversity. So, with the C57 mouse comparison, think of Clarence's little mice, okay? Little mice. He grabs a few pairs from a pet shop. Those are the tiny founder group. He breeds them in isolation. Every lab mouse of that strain today carries the same exact genetic footprint of those founders. So now apply that same logic to humans. A very small group of sapiens, maybe only a few hundred, leave Africa, okay? Now they mix with Neanderthals in the Levant area, and they carry a very specific set of alleles, and those are the hybrids, yeah? Those hybrids then expand into Eurasia and replace or absorb everyone else. Today, every non-African shares the same bottlenecked genetic blueprint, just scaled up across billions of people. That's why the genome outside of Africa looks clone-like. So when we look at Neanderthal fragments in non-Africans, it's not a messy scatter, it's a curated set. Keratin, hair, nails, skin toughness. Pigmentation, skin color, freckles, adaptation to light. Immune genes, disease resistance. Fat metabolism and circadian rhythm, yeah? Everywhere else, Neanderthal DNA was scrubbed away. So what survives is not random. It's the same select set, like a patch installed in the genome, okay? Now what this implies, from a naturalist lens, this is a textbook founder effect plus bottleneck, where one small population's quirks become universal, okay? It looks less like a rollout because the same patch is seen everywhere outside of Africa, as if a template was chosen and then cloned outwards through conquest, survival, advantage, or deliberate spread. All right. So in other words, the reason that non-African genome looks clone-like is because it really is the product of a tiny founder stock that then expanded unnaturally fast, carrying a uniform package of Neanderthal fragments. All right. And that's part one. I'm definitely want to get into. Don't forget also, I'm definitely going to get into the whole STDs, because, like I said, I've posted on my TikTok video showing that STDs didn't even originate in Africa. We didn't even have STDs. Can you imagine that, guys? Can you imagine that? All STDs linked to Eurasia, even HIV, the ones that they tried to slap on us, guys. They guess when they appeared in Congo, when the Belgian appeared. Or was it the Belgian or the Germans at that point? But anyway, they had an army bases there, and and if you even Google and you just say where and you just find for yourself, search all the STDs, all of them, and you'll see. They even say it themselves, but you just got to word it in a certain way, because Google likes it. If Google senses that you're trying to say something outwardly, yeah, like you're trying to say that, oh, you know what I mean, like it's going to give you things to make you feel like, do you get what I mean? It's going to give you, so you've got to word it in a certain way, yeah? Read between the lines, yeah? Word things in a way that it's going to give you the truth, because if you try and word them and you look like you're searching for the truth too much, it's going to give you all the bullshit in front. It's going to word it in ways that it's going to confuse you. But I can't wait to touch on that topic as well. To the people that are like me, and you know, you have got a good heart, you're not here trying to spread hate or anything like that. It's nothing to do with that, but you just yearn for the truth because you hate living in a world filled with so many lies, and you're just fed up with it. I'm done. I'm over it. I'm done. I'm tired. I'm so over this ish, because I promise you the world would be a better place if we stopped playing this freaking game the wrong way around. If we stopped playing by these man rules. These men are way younger than us. These men don't have the same connection to source that we do. That's why they're running this place to the ground. They're already upset with themselves and where they're going and how they're living in their lives. And the fact that they ain't got no souls because they lost that connection through choice. I mean, maybe some of them it wasn't through choice, but unfortunately their ancestors' choices, whatever. But at the end of the day, they're making this whole place crash and burn because they're already crashing and burning. They don't have that same connection to I and I as we do. We are of earth, and but not even of that, not like how they are of earth, but I and I is I. We are connected to all and everything I and I, within I. So when I and I bleeds, we bleed. But you see, when you don't have connection to source, you don't care what you do to the planet. You don't care how much you strip of it. You don't care how much you strip of human souls and how much you... That's why everything to them is marketed. Everything is packaged. Everything is... How can we sell you? How can we make you into a product? Because they have no soul. They have no soul to sell. Otherwise they would have sold it. So they sell us to the highest bidders. But we have sovereignty, which they can never take, I and I. No matter what rules and stuff that they place us on, we are always free. And never forget that you are always free to make any choice that you want. And sometimes just do random stuff, because I love to do that. Just to remind people, I got fucking free will. Random shit. Never forget that. Anyway, don't forget to like, comment, share, subscribe, all of that good. If you know this is the stuff that you're into and you wish you was around more people that spoke about these kind of things. Listen, same here. We're all in this dunya together. I and I is I.